It just shows the ignorance that these people try to portray as wisdom and intelligence. This fissure caused millions of years ago has nothing to do with this erosion. Nothing whatsoever. Next. The back of the Sphinx, clearly showing water erosion. Clearly, this is not wind and sand. Wind and sand does not do limestone like this. And it's wonderful you can go and touch it these days. It's just a great experience. Next. And this is a very important piece. I want you to keep this in your mind. This is what Chris will go into much more detail about. This is the particular what we call rose quartz. I showed you other examples of it. Rose quartz granite, which comes from Aswan, where we take you, and I'm going to show you a slide of it, some 400 miles as the falcon flies from this area to Aswan. I say this altar is 50,000 years old. It's just my opinion. This is the original structure. Again, Chris can talk about the type of, it's clearly eroded. It's been attacked. It's been subject to wind and sand since then. But original precision and tolerance is here. This is Chris's expertise. But I want you to look at this color. Keep the color. This is the natural color of rose quartz granite. Okay, let's move. The stele that's in front of the Sphinx tells the story of Tutmosis IV. I'm not going to talk about it. It talks about him supposedly clearing the sand away from the Sphinx. She made him king. But what's shown here is underground structures under the Sphinx, showing that she's on her own platform. Looks like there's chambers, rooms, structures underneath the Sphinx. They don't talk about this. They just like to talk about the story that shows that he mentions Khafre's name or title here somewhere, showing that Khafre never mentions Khafre built the pyramid. It mentions just the title. I believe it mentioned that Khafre also cleared the sand away, and they don't want to talk about that because they're not going to talk about the Sphinx being buried in sand right after she was built or carved, because that's impossible. Next. This is the alabaster floor in the Sphinx temple. One of the alabaster floors still extant. I date this floor at perhaps 50,000 years old. Still there today. And it's for sound resonance, for harmonics. Next. Here we are in the Great Pyramid. Let me see where we are. Okay. Chris is going to talk about his theory here. What I'm going to do now is present a theory that he and I are both working on. And we call it the destruction hypothesis. Chris goes into detail about his book. The first one to really speak of this was the great British Egyptologist, the father of modern archaeology, named Sir William Flinders Petrie. Petrie went into the Great Pyramid in the 1880s, particularly in the King's Chamber, and he said, there's something going on here. There's some strange anomalies. The walls of the King's Chamber seem to be separating from the floor. They're bulging out like some internal force acted upon them. There's also cracks in the granite beams in the King's Chamber, which I'll show you. Well, he mentioned something going on. He couldn't understand why. Well, Christopher has followed up on this, and he and I are both working on this theory that there is distinct evidence that there was an explosion or fire in the Great Pyramid in antiquity, which, of course, totally negates it as a tomb right there. That because of the energy involved, something happened, and I'm going to show you evidence of that. I actually just had an article in a WEX issue about 3 issues ago, maybe 2-3 issues ago, where I had, actually it was last year, where it was there an explosion in the Great Pyramid? I had an article also in Atlantis Rising to this effect. So both Christopher and I are working on this idea. Now, Chris, this is in the Queen's Chamber. It's one of the so-called external passages which doesn't lead to the outside. Chris will go into detail about this. But there's staining here. Now, Chris postulates that hydrogen gas was produced in the Great Pyramid. We agree. He says, according to his evidence, and there is evidence to this, that chemicals may have been used. A dilute solution of hydrochloric acid and an anhydrous zinc mixed together under proper conditions will produce tremendous amounts of hydrogen. And he also says he thinks this staining on this wall here could have been caused to the hydrochloric acid reacting with the limestone. Well, it's possible. But it's also possible that this conflagration we talk about could have caused this staining because, in my opinion, since we first discussed this theory in 1999 when we were in Egypt together, and I've gone back a couple of times, I have found damage to all walls inside the Great Pyramid. Every wall in every chamber shows damage and staining. Let's take a look. Now, here are these rectangular slots. We're in the Grand Gallery. There are, again, supposed to be 28 of these on each side. 14 on each side, 28 complete. Egyptologists speculate statues of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, were put in these slots, although they've never produced any evidence of any statue except a 3-inch little statue that's in the Cairo Museum, but that's another story. Never found any evidence. Well, there also isn't any evidence of what we think might have been there. Chris speculates in his book, Giza Power Plant, these might have been some kind of devices, resonators, to amplify the energy. He calls them perhaps Helmholtz resonators. Why they don't exist, we'll show you. But also, this is key, is right here. This is limestone, folks, but this looks like granite. It looks like that rose quartz granite. It's not. There's a patina on the walls inside the Grand Gallery, like they were subjected to great heat. Let's go on. Chris points this out. He's actually got a better slide in his PowerPoint than I do. There's these scorch marks in the ceiling of the Grand Gallery. They happen to correspond right over to these rectangular slots. Right over. So we speculate during this accident, explosion, these Helmholtz resonators may have exploded and caused these scorch marks. And again, let me stop you if you have any alternative ideas, because I get emails all the time from our website, gizapyramid.com. Christopher and I are both the directors of research. Oh no, this could have been caused by torch marks from tourists. Or breath, carbon dioxide. Well, these things have been cleaned. Chris saw this when he went back in 2001. The Egyptian Department of Antiquities is always cleaning inside the Great Pyramid. And opposed to someone else who said they may use solvents, some harsh chemicals may have caused the scorching. Please, folks, this is Egypt. They use water. Soap and water at the most, but basically water. I've been inside when they do this cleaning. They don't use any harsh solvents or anything like that. They use good old-fashioned water. So they cleaned the ceiling, and they made these scorch marks even more visible. So these scorch marks go into the limestone. This is not an external reaction. This is something that reacted to the limestone itself, and we have even more proof. We'll show you the smoking gun next. And this is the smoking gun. And credit must be given where credit is deserved. Christopher Dunn needs to be given the credit for this, because he made this discovery in 1999. We just did a conference. It's our second conference. In 1999, we did our first conference where our good friend and great technical advisor who's working for us, Ted St. Rain, and I'm honored to be working with him again, was doing the video and sound at that time. And we were in Egypt then together. Well, as they were videoing Chris at this time, and they shot the floodlights, this is the upper wall of the Grand Gallery, Chris looked and said, now, wait a minute. Look what's there. This is not limestone. This is granite. This has never been said by an Egyptologist. This appears in no textbook. The wall, we know the King's Chamber is all granite, but no one ever noticed before, because no one ever put a light on it, that the upper wall of the Grand Gallery is all granite. But folks, I remember I told you to keep in mind the color of that rose quartz granite. This is rose quartz granite that comes from Aswan. Look at this color. It's all scorched. It's all darkened. And folks, this scorching goes into the granite. Now, we've got a whole team of independent researchers involved. If we can get a micro slice, just a micro slice, of this wall, subjected, we've got geologists lined up, we've got chemists lined up, we've got electron scanning microscope at our disposal, we've got the lab work, we could test and see and let these independent scientists determine what type of heat, first of all, what type of discoloration it is, what could have caused it, what type of temperature could have been involved. We think this is the smoking gun, folks. This is definite evidence that this couldn't possibly have been a tomb for a king, that this was an energy device and some event happened in it to cause an explosion, scorching, burning, charring of this rose quartz granite. Okay. Now we're inside the king's chamber. This shows the cracks as I saw them in 1992 that Christopher talks about in his book, which I talk about in my book. Cracks in the granite, first seen by Petrie in the 1880s. What could have caused that? Well, Petrie, trying to come up with an idea, speculated it was an earthquake that might have damaged the structure. Well, the fact of the matter is you go inside the descending passageway, which goes 350 feet down. First 150 feet is constructed stone. Last 200 feet goes to limestone bedrock. And Petrie found it only deviates 1/4 of an inch of the whole 350 feet. That should have been damaged. If it was an earthquake closer to the epicenter, the descending passageway should be offline, and it is not. So it was not an earthquake. Next slide. Went back in 2003, the crack's still there. The Egyptian Department of Antiquities has put these little snaps here, so it gives you folks as tourists, when you go into the King's Chamber, you say, oh, geez, oh, okay, it's not going to fall on us because they got these little safety clamps here. It's not going to fall anyway, folks. Don't worry about it. But Christopher will tell you his theory is the one I subscribe to. Whatever this explosion was, whatever this event was, because these are chambers above. He'll talk about them in more detail. Erroneously called, mislabeled relieving chambers. They relieve nothing. They're actually hollow, so that these granite beams were thrust upward. They weigh about 70 tons, crashed down, and cracked. Had nothing to do with an earthquake. Some event happened in the king's chamber which caused this. Next. Here we are at Abu Ruwash, the northern part of Buwizir. This is a pyramid. It's called the unfinished pyramid. It's destroyed. Nothing there. They claim it was the third son of this King Khufu. For some reason, he left Giza, went 8 kilometers away, decided to build a pyramid here, but it's all destroyed, or it's quarried. Well, it's not quarried. First of all, here's the core blocks that show this was a pyramid. Next.